what they want to achieve in their sport. Some achieve them, some don't. Earlier this year, West Australian speed sailor Mal Wright, he told us he wanted to become the fastest in the world. Well, a couple of weeks ago, he had a chance to do just that, as sailboarders from all over the country met for the Sandy Point Speed Classic in Victoria. Charles Stewart was there to see what happened.
This is Sandy Point near Wilson's Promontory, the southeastern tip of the Australian mainland. It's a flat, shallow inlet separated from the wild waters of Bass Strait by a low, sandy spit, acknowledged as one of the windiest places in Australia, averaging over 230 days a year when the winds blow over 26 knots. It may not be good for much, but for speed sailing, it's near to perfect. That's why it's been chosen as the venue for the annual Sandy Point Speed Trials. More than 100 sailboarders came from all over the country to take part in this year's event. People like West Australian Peter Dans, lured by the thrill of going fast.
What to you is the attraction of speed sailing? Just the gut thrill, you know, of the out and out speed and being on the edge type thing. It's quite a risk sometimes when you're going fast. I like that. Yeah.
Last year in the Canary Islands, speed sailing was showcased in near-perfect conditions with the world's best doing battle. Many sailors recorded speeds of around 37 to 38 knots, not far off the world record. Then, earlier this year, an Englishman, Eric Beale, smashed the 40-knot barrier for the first time in a private time trial with a speed of 40.5 knots. It seemed incredible, but many of the Sandy Point competitors thought it was an attainable speed.
If the wind blows like they say it does here, I think on a 200-metre, 250-metre course like they're going to run, it's quite possible that someone might be able to hit 40 knots here.
I don't see any problem on a good day of speeds going well over 40 knots.
Speed sailing is all about having the right board, the right sail, the right conditions, and the right mental attitude. Some sailors come more prepared than others, like Mal Wright, another sandgroper, and Australia's speed record holder with the best of 39 knots. He arrived in a truck with a dozen fully rigged sails and as many boards loaded in the back. Meanwhile, the famous Sandy Point high winds were staying away. The wind at the moment is blowing around about 10 to 12 knots. Now that's not enough for them to stage the event. They need at least 15 knots. Now in 15 knots, a sailboard can virtually double the speed of the wind, sailing up to 30 knots. Now if the wind itself gets up to 30 knots, well then the action becomes intense. For days, however, the wind remained anything but intense. There was enough to sail in, but nothing serious. The sailors amused themselves any way they could. Some, like 18-year-old wave sailor Jason Polico, sailed no matter what. Others, like Sydney sailor Mark Hardy, just practiced a few forward loops. The tedium lasted for 6 days, and then it happened. A cold front brought with it winds gusting between 50 and 60 knots. They were conditions that only 23 of the 110 sailors managed to handle. Young Jason Polico showed what was possible by going out with a tiny wave sail and recording a speed of around 38 knots. As the winds hit 66 knots, several rigs were blown away, never to be seen again. One sailor nearly drowned when his dry suit filled with water. Then it was Mal Wright's turn. His wake showed he was really moving as he blitzed down the course, hitting 41.93 knots. It was faster than anyone had ever sailed before, firmly putting Sandy Point on the windsurfing map and Mal Wright's name into the history books.
41.93 knots. Now that incidentally is around 78 kilometres an hour. And well, it's yet to be ratified as a new world sailing record, but does appear that it will be approved as the new world windsurfing speed record, no matter what the international yachting authorities decide.